Hi, I'm Alan Ross, Managing Editor of APC Media. We are here at the 2026 IEEE PES T&D Show. All right, my next guest is Ben Lanz. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for all the things that you do for the industry and definitely do for APC Media. We have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to talk less so that you can talk more.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing I want to talk about is Osmose. That's your day job.
That's my day job.
That's the people that pay you to do this stuff, but you have an enormous amount of freedom to meet people in the industry. I know you do the podcast series, which we're going to talk about, but you did a panel here at IEEE.
Right.
And when you were telling me about the panel, I wish I had you on camera, but you were talking about some of the, I don't know if it came up in the panel, but talk a little bit about what happened in the panel and then talk about these numbers that we talked about in the trillions of dollars. Remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So talk to me about that.
So the panel, the basis of the panel is the fact that we have utilities replacing infrastructure at a rate that requires the assets to live 100 years.
Yeah.
So some of the numbers are the grid, replacement grid for the US is targeted somewhere around $6.5 trillion. That's the replacement value. So if we go out today and start replacing it at a given rate, according to the Bank of America's analysis, we're replacing or we're investing about $63 billion a year into the grid. And that's just the T&D part, transmission and distribution. And that's not new infrastructure. That's just addressing the aged infrastructure.
Wow.
So when you think about that, 63 and you divide it into 6.5 trillion, you end up with less than 1%. So there are some utilities which I'm sure are replacing more than that. But as a whole, as all the experts that I can connect with and all the studies that I've seen, it looks like we're replacing less than 1%. And no one has countered that yet. Yeah. So I believe it to be true. And in that fact, we have to come to terms with the fact that we're going to have to make these assets live a lot longer. Right. So when we think about what Osmose plays in that area, why we play in the area, we have to be able to extend life. We have to make the assets that we have live longer. When people say, how long do assets live? They say, oh, 30, 50. Some people will say 60, 70, but few people say 100. Right. And the reality is, it is 100. Unless somehow we're going to come up with a pot of money that somehow magically replaces all these assets, we're going to have to get better. And I was just in a session here, the main session this morning with Kevin Geraghty. He's the Chief Operating Officer with San Diego Gas and Electric. And that question came up in the session. And he said, well, an investor-owned utility, unless we are required by regulators, we're going to, if we're not careful, it's easy to let these assets go. Right. Because we have to do maintenance, we have to do upgrades in order to keep them that affordable, reliable, and resilient grid. So in essence, our model here in the US, which is predominantly investor-owned utilities, we need to have regulations that tell us as utilities how much we need to be replacing. Because again, if we're trying to make things affordable, one of the areas that it's easy to let slip is that aging infrastructure. And that's where Osmose comes in. So Osmose, the generic pitch is that we can double the life at 5 times lower cost and 5 times faster than the traditional replacements. So what that puts us in the space in 7 major asset classes, that would be overhead transmission, overhead distribution, underground, such as cables, vaults, pad mount equipment, and network. And I left out substations that actually bridge the overhead versus underground space. In those 7 major asset classes, we have the ability to assess the condition of the asset, to determine root cause of deterioration, prescribed, and this is a key word, a capitalized life extension solution, and then in many cases implement that or work with the utilities partners such as contractors or engineering firms to implement those solutions. And so from an Osmose standpoint, that is the message that we have. the utilities that were on the panel, we had a couple of folks on the panel that were one from ComEd in Chicago here and one in National Grid, and they had different perspectives. And what I really appreciated about their perspective is they were bringing in the aspects that, okay, we have an aging grid. We acknowledge that we're probably not replacing it fast enough to maintain the reliability and resilience that we need. But then in the face of that, we also have all of these weather-related challenges, right? These massive events that are coming that are stressing the assets that we have. So we have aging infrastructure. We're not replacing it fast enough. We're not maintaining the reliability to a standard. So what we end up with, we end up with these billion-dollar outages. And right now, the U.S. is facing somewhere around $20 billion events per year. And that's impacting GDP. For example, if you take, say, Florida for an example, the daily GDP of Florida is well over $3 billion a day. That's closer to 4. And if you think about a fraction of that state being out, that's real money that will never exist again. That's never going to have the tax revenue, and businesses are not going to make that up. But yet, the utilities are having to make decisions that are really societal decisions. So our topic in the panel was about how do we start, first of all, making better assessments, so total life cycle cost of the assets. How do we make them live longer? And how do we take into account the climate events that are happening in conjunction with the aging infrastructure? Because it's having a massive impact on society. And how are we going to extend the life at an affordable rate?
Affordability has become a big issue. It's interesting that when you mentioned the utility saying, an investor-owned utility, we have to be told. I mean, we need to have something. And part of the reason you have to be told is there's 50 state regulators that love to give you money on capital. You spend $1,000 and we'll let you make 1,100 in return. It's a broken model. And until the feds or the overall global head of this thing, and I think that would be the DOE or somebody would come along, you just can't rely on 50 state politicians group, regulators, and they all mean well, but they have to go by what their mandate is. And you see more of them I know in Georgia there were some very forward-thinking people that were saying, no, we need to look at OPEX and CAPEX, and we need to look at all of these kinds of things, very forward-thinking. The guy that was most forward-thinking just lost his job in the last election. And I thought to myself, he was your most forward-thinking guy, and you put somebody in that's just going to be about, you need to make your rates cheaper, and not realizing all of this complexity.
So I spend a fair amount of time, because my role is in external and government affairs as we relate to Osmose. So
set you up that way.
Yeah, you did. So I do engage with regulators quite frequently. And you'll hear it, it's the reoccurring theme of any panel. It takes collaboration, right? I think if good people recognize the value of the proposal that's being put forward. So for example, how is it in society's best interest to extend the life of assets, to use the tools at hand to have capital upgrades that can put decades of useful life back on these assets? And how can the utilities in some cases are afraid of even mentioning anything other than replacement? And you say, well, why? In most cases, it's an educational element. It's not that people want to do the wrong thing for society. They just don't know. So, for example, I was talking to some regulators and I said, well, it's a statistic that 60% of utility employees have less than 10 years of experience. And they said, oh, that's nothing. So 60% of my staff has less than 5 years experience. So you already, you understand that they may not even know how you extend the life of a wood pole, which is as a solution that's been out forever.
Right.
Literally, there's a little metal bracket that you can put on it, even after it's to the point where it's the point of no return. You must replace it by code. You put one of these little metal brackets on it, so-called a truss, and you can extend the life for another 40 years. And if you get in front of that with additional preservatives, you won't have the rot to begin with. So it is a very simple, well-designed systems, but some utilities aren't using it because, well, they haven't been under this kind of pressure before. So here's the opportunity, and it comes down to education. And I firmly believe that if the regulators and the utilities and the vendors understand that the societal impact, the positive societal impact of life extension, that we will be much better off. And that's actually part of my role as Osmose, to get those heads together and have those conversations.
Isn't that great that you get to do what you love to do when you
I
love
love
to
getting
do it?
people together.
This is another thing. I'll make this premise, and until somebody refutes the premise, I'm gonna kind of live with it. A certain percentage of the DER power that's made, and the last number I've heard is 37% of the power that comes from wind and solar is actually used. Well, what's the inverse of that? 63% is generated and wasted. Now, would you run a coal plant, or would you run a gas peaker plant and know that 60 some odd percent of the power that you generate is not used? That would be, people would say, absolutely no way. But we accept it in DER, because it's the nature of wind and solar. And that's making the case for batteries now. And it's happening rapidly. What if you could capture it? What if we could change that number from 37% to just say, flip the number, 63% is used? It would have a tremendous economic impact on the industry. I mean, you want affordability? Now you're going to have affordability because you can create and sell more power that's already generated instead of losing it. So there are things as we get together and talk at a macro level that I think are going to work. And I think the industry, your point, collaboration, it's happening more and more. It has to be, we have to move away from the old model. In the old model, if I was a utility and I wanted to buy, I'm an engineer, and I know that I'm going to build a new substation, so I have to buy a transformer for that main sub. So I put this stuff together. I'm not allowed to talk. If you're a vendor, I can't talk to you. Can't talk to any vendors. I have to talk to procurement. Well, I can't tell you what I need, so we're going to have you bid on this and low bid. And you're looking at it going, but that's stupid. For an extra $5, you can do this. You're not allowed to talk to the people that are using it and the people that know. And that used to be the way we did it. The engineers could talk to vendors and say, hey, is there anything better? And you would get this collaboration. And then, not picking on procurement people, but when procurement came along and the idea is, hey, we're afraid of convoluted things like, hey, they're going to rig the bid and all of that. It became, you're not allowed to talk to them. You know what's happened lately? That pendulum swung the other way, because now people are saying, well, who's doing something better? Who's got a better idea? Who's got a collaborative approach to it? And I love the fact that engineering mindsets, because I think like an engineer, I'm a problem solver. We want to fix problems, right?
Yeah, I would say if someone waits for the RFP to come out,
too late.
It's too late.
Yes.
The opportunity for education, you really need to be thinking out 5 to 10 years out, to planting those seeds, educating that workforce, and that would be ideal. But you at least need to be a year or two in front of that RFP, because by the time that comes out, it's usually very specific. And even if it isn't specific, it's the time of collaboration is virtually over, because you're restricted in communicating.
And things are moving so fast, though, from a developmental standpoint. In 2 years, there could be some solutions that weren't there when that was first introduced. Now, I'm not so sure that'll be the same for like transformers or cables or things, but yeah, it's the same truth for cables and transformers. There's new developments all the time. These young, small startup companies coming in with really good ideas and and we don't get to use them if we've already shut the RFP down. I've heard that over and over from companies that have great solutions, but they can't break through. They can't break in because they're too late to the game. It's like, no, I wish I'd known this 5 years ago. Well, we didn't know it 5 years ago.
Well, I think that's really the role of APC Media, is to help make that bridge, right? Because so often news these days is aggregated with AI and so forth, and it's humans that have expertise and deep trusting connections that know other humans that have deep knowledge in a certain area. You can create an agentic employee, right?
Right.
And there's businesses that's all they do now, right? Is
Right.
create these agentic employees. In fact, we've had that conversation. But you need the person with the knowledge to begin with to create that
right.
tool, if you will. And I think in many cases, the podcast that we're working on and the in-person interviews here at these conferences, this is really the key to helping us take the next step. I can't tell you how many good conversations I've had with people and connecting people with good ideas
Yeah.
just because we sat down and had a conversation. So I think the industry is very hungry for that, and that's a real opportunity for
great.
APC Media.
So speaking of that, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to put them together here. You're a member of the APC Executive Editorial Board, which means you help direct where we're going, but you also then have the ability to bring in some of that knowledge and share, which I really appreciate. That you do. Sometimes it just takes the pressure off of me because I don't want to go to the conference, and you go and do that. That's great. I think you're the parents.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
I enjoy learning.
Yeah. But as a member of that board, you also got another member of that board, Audra Drazga. You and her came up with the podcast idea.
Right.
And normally at APC, it would be, oh, Alan would get involved. I had nothing to do with it. I was so delighted when I saw the episodes up here, and I thought, I know these people, but I have nothing to do with it. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and where it's going and what do you want to accomplish with it?
Yeah. The podcast, I think, has a unique spot. What I was interested to see is that quite a few of the folks that I hang out with, I would say people who are given the opportunity to be in that thought leadership space by their organizations. I'm talking about the folks like Mike Beeler and Wayne Bishop and Liz Cook. I'm seeing more of those people having podcasts or participating in podcasts. And so there is a little bit of a trend, but one of the things that we can provide is that connectivity to the utility and the utilities who are solving problems. And in many cases, these are voices, in some cases, people who don't get to the conferences that often, who perhaps can't sit down and have a conversation at a conference because they're not allowed to attend. Or they're just so busy right now and they can't attend. So this gives us another avenue. For example, there were a number of people at this conference that said, I would love to have that conversation, but I'm completely booked and I can't do it. I said, well, we can take a rain check on that. So it gives us another opportunity to connect with these folks. And lo and behold, when we can have these deeper conversations with the challenges that they're facing, and what I try to do with the podcast, instead of just talking about the big challenges of the climate events and the data center build out, large loads, electrification, what are you doing, right? Yeah. And what are the specific challenges? And if you can name it, who are some of the vendors that you're using? What are some of the technologies you're using? Because that's what vendors are looking for. They're looking to understand, well, who's winning in the marketplace, what solutions are working, or what are the challenges that I can start working on specifically. Right? We all know what the big challenges are. So the goal of the podcast is to have rich conversations with people who are in the trenches. So not so much perhaps at the policy level, although we'll probably get some of those folks in because we want to collaborate and some folks at the strategy level we're talking about, but also the doers, really that management and director level, people who are high enough in the organization to see the future, but are not too far away from the actual problems that they don't know what the challenges are. So, and then giving this platform the opportunity, or our listeners the opportunity, to engage with utilities in that way, to learn, especially a lot of our vendors who are participating in the platform some are providing our ads. Some people are providing articles and editorial content, but how do we get those utility voices elevated is a big part of what the podcast is all about.
Yeah, there's a craze when podcasts began. I just, that was not for me. I'm not a podcaster, a podcast listener. So I've kind of kept that mindset here. But somebody told me recently, when you're driving your car, you can't watch videos, you can't read, so you listen. And that's why podcasts are so rich. They're taking off, why they're so important. Because most of the people who drive somewhere would listen. And, radio is kind of not the issue anymore. You can do your streaming when you're here. But the idea is, if there's a way that people can trust, I mean, I know true crime podcasts are like the rage, right? But if people can trust the content, it becomes a channel they listen to. And, yeah. So the idea of, and that's kind of an interesting thing is at APC, we're trying to use every digital tool available and meet them where they are. And it's interesting because the people my age that are retiring and we have a certain way that we read. And, my engineering people, we love to read. We kind of don't want to watch it. You're not going to watch what you're talking about technically, but we'll read it. We may not listen to it. Whereas the exact opposite is for the next generation. And I say next generation, I'm talking the 30 to 40 year engineer working at a utility or working with the vendors. That person would much rather listen than maybe even watch. And the next generation is going to probably even watch more than listen. I think there's going to be a fine one. You put it in a game and you make it a gaming experience. And guess what? We'll catch the 15-year-olds. They're going to go, hey, I can't do anything that's not in a game.
Yeah. Well, have you done a search lately and used AI mode? I mean, you cannot, right?
Yeah.
It's almost forced upon us. But what I've noticed is that very often it's referencing video. So it'll take text out of the video. So that's already built into the system. And if that's how the search engines are
doing it,
collecting very useful information, very often you can get a very quick overview. It's not always right? It'll say, you ask a question, it says yes. And then it says, but then if you look at the reference, a lot of times they're video references.
Exactly.
And so in order for APC Media to participate in that and make sure that that trusted content is getting heard by the folks who are asking the questions, I think it's very important for us to build this platform, and I'm excited to participate.
We are starting, realizing that we brought on a couple of experts who understand it from Google's standpoint, who are they know the algorithm. They've been trained by Google. When Google bought YouTube, there was this whole, what does Google want? They want to keep you on YouTube. They don't want you leaving YouTube, and then they'll pop these ads through there. But we never really understood that. I just thought this was content that we do. But we looked back at the rich content that we've done over the last 7 years from all of these things. It's amazing. Yeah. And so we ran that against what people are searching for. And we're now in the process of saying, if somebody searches AI, for instance, and they're looking for partial discharge, everybody's got partial discharge information. We have about 52 references to partial discharge on video, and probably another 20 on written. That's a lot of rich content that AI is going to go in and get, and it's going to show the APC content there. So we're realizing that ourselves. I wish I could say that we were clairvoyant and could see it. It took my son in London, who knows how to do this, to say, Dad, it's different. YouTube was purchased by Google for $52 billion for a reason.
Right.
Play the game. Let them know that you know. I said, no, that's the next generation. I want to switch gears because another thing that you and I both absolutely love is an organization called ESARA, the Electrical Safety and Reliability Association. It is a 501c6 not-for-profit. You're one of our founding board members, and we've kind of got a who's who of people, not in the utility space, but primarily industrial and data center space, with a lot of what I would consider to be forward-thinking vendors that have come on and said, we've got to educate the marketplace. Electrical safety and reliability, I've always said that if you have a reliable plant, you're much more likely to have a safe plant. You can have a safe plant and get a plaque and not be reliable. And I used the Gulf Water Deep Horizon. There were two guys on a helicopter flying there to give them a safety award. Now, the gentleman that was a foreman on one of the shifts had complained about the vibration in the main, whatever they call that drill. He had complained about it and just said, this is not normal. for almost 18 months.
Hmm.
And that's
Didn't
what
know that
failed.
part of the story.
He died.
Oh my.
And the two guys that flew in with the safety thing went, well, they weren't reliable. And they sure as heck shouldn't have been called safe. They get the plaque, the award, because you can pass whatever the test is. We're passionate about that. People should work safe and go home safe.
Right.
Low voltage shocks, they're finding more and more that leads to a lot of PTSD, divorce rates double, whatever. I mean, we're finding things out about the dangers of power beyond just the major mass electrocution. And getting companies like Flint Hills Resources and Land O'Lakes that step in, and CBRE, who manages, between CBRE and NTT, I think they manage more data centers than any other two organizations on the planet. These are the people that have come together. Why did you join it? Why are you passionate about it?
Yeah. So I think from a organizational standpoint, what ESARA has that you don't see other places is really those practitioners, the folks that are implementing the technology, as well as the folks who have deep knowledge in the reliability solutions coming together. And of course, there's a history to that we both know. But it's really those people and the level of passion that each of those folks have. And working with them, it was a former organization that we both worked together on. And seeing that, I recognize that that is a special team. And when you have a team and you have a market that has a need, especially in something as important as safety and reliability, I want to be a part of that. I have some experience in a one subject, which spent the time I spent in the cable world, and I was happy to provide that information. But when I saw people that had knowledge in all of these other assets and other tools, such as ultrasound and infrared and the technologies used to, say, put these arc-proof windows and so forth with Iris, people with deep knowledge and solutions, I wanted to be a part of that. And also, it's a great opportunity. If I had to spend time going to lots of different conferences in the utility industry, which I'm heavily involved in, and spend time going to a lot of the conferences, say, in the industrial space, I would have to reduplicate myself. So this is an opportunity for me to interact with that part of the power world, which is huge and I think underserved.
Much underserved, because the utilities, for instance, transformers, is that we started to get to the point of we couldn't get them, right? We had scarcity. They began to buy slots, which is, in my lifetime, that never happened. I mean, buying slots at prices prevailing, because they can't tell you 5 years from now what the copper is going to cost, what's going to go into. So I'm just shocked that the utilities had to do that to make sure they got in line. Well, guess who didn't do that? Is the steel industrial plants that has 20 plants around the United States. And they might have at each plant an engineer that's in charge of that, but he's not forward thinking about, hey, what if my furnace transformer goes out? How long is it going to take to get a new one? Well, 3 years. Well, that's millions, if not sometimes billions of dollars of lost productivity that I don't think the production people, the C-level people at that level, they didn't understand it. So you couldn't go back and just say, hey, it's demand is really, really high. We kind of missed it. They had to come up with a way of preserving the existing assets while they got in line. Now, the good news is there's a lot of new capacity coming online. And I'd like to think that now that same steel company is now looking at it and saying, okay, instead of each of you going to the market, we're going to buy 10 of them, and they're going to be scattered around, and we're going to take that decision above your individual plant level. Guess who's fighting like Hades to make sure that doesn't happen? That individual plant level, because it's an allocation. I won't need a transformer, but I'm going to get charged for part of it. And he's not taking care of his equipment, which is then getting into the whole idea of he's got a new plant, he's got a 52-year-old plant. But it's happening. Good things are happening even there to make sure that if the world, I could say America, but if the world were going to keep its productive capacity moving, it's going to have an electrical system they can trust and rely on.
Right. I'd like to add one more thing
Sure.
about ESARA that I see a value. And I've seen this in a parallel organization, Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, which is focused on the utility side of things. There were a group of folks that had incredible amount of expertise and in different areas who would go to utilities and say, these are the best practices. And they said, well, is there an IEEE standard on that? Or well, who else is saying that? Well, we're the ones out there doing the work. We've got the data. Here it is. Oh, but I need some other organization other than you saying that. Well, if we have to wait around for IEEE to produce a guide or to produce a standard, it's going to be a decade or more, and then it's going to be this watered down thing that generally I found in many cases isn't all that helpful. It doesn't have those nuggets of knowledge and expertise and something that can move us, especially at the rate that we need to move now. Right? We need to move much more quickly, especially with a lot of the build out, especially the data centers. So some of the standards they're using are in some cases 20 years behind on the knowledge area. So if they say, oh, I'm just going to quote some standard, it's likely not even going to produce the value that they're looking for. I know like one little piece here that a lot of data centers are specifying a certain kind of conduit. It's a fiberglass, instead of the PVC. And they're getting all kinds of benefits from it. But if we had to wait for some industry guide to talk about the benefits of that, it would take forever. So just one little example, but that I was just talking to someone here at this IEEE conference about. But ESARA has the opportunity to be that third-party authority to collect this body of knowledge and transfer it from a third-party position, right? So it's not just one individual organization saying it. It's providers of the technology and users saying, this is what's beneficial, and here's the folks that have the deep knowledge about it, and put that in a context of a third-party authority and be able to deliver that to the industry faster. And that's one thing that I think we can really be of service to the industry.
Yeah. Well, we've taken up a lot of your time. I appreciate it so much. We probably need to make sure that we do this twice or three times a year so that we can continue to catch up.
Right.
You're one of the leading voices of the industry. You said something that Granger has used. It's for the doers who get it done. That's your podcast, right? It's for the doers who get it done.
Sure.
And we need to listen to them because they're the people that are breaking through some of the old narratives. And the biggest old narrative was, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Sure.
One thing I really appreciate about the industry as a whole is nobody's saying that anymore. They're not saying, well, that's the way we've always done and hide behind it. Because what they're saying is, who's doing it better? Who's doing it faster? Who's doing it more affordable? We want to learn from them. And that's a good thing. The industry's looking for answers. But
it is a bit of a crisis, and we're meeting the crisis.
Well, I like that one. Shake hands on meeting the crisis. This has been an APC Minute. Thank you for joining us.